7 o'clock, Dr. Stedman.
Okay, I just started the recording. Make sure that let me make sure. Okay, it's recording. Okay, welcome to our Tuesday night Zoom class. This is week 3. Time is quickly passing. Week 3 out of 16 weeks. So I told you guys that it would go by quickly. As you can see on the screen, this is week 3, and you can find this in Blackboard. And remember, we indicated that everything that you see in red deals with work with Evidence 1, the APSL. And as we will be talking about different things this week, just a reminder that APSL Task 1 revisions are going to be due to Dr. Revis and me for a final grade this Sunday, but we're going to talk about some other things before you get to that point, because there's some revisions that's got to be done, and I want to make sure everybody's clear on what to do. We're just going to kind of go over what we've got to do this week. And then again, many of you have already started submitting these, but you must complete 2 peer reviews, and this is 2 people from your Zoom team, and they will be submitted into Blackboard to Dr. Revis and me for a grade. The ones that have been submitted, Dr. Revis, so far have been good. So I think that I'll remind you of that again before the class is over with, but just a reminder of that those will be due. And then we're going to review APSL Task 2 this evening. The draft will be due on Sunday night. You'll be turning in APSL Task 1 for final grade. APSL Task 2 will go to discussion board for instructor review and for peer review as well. And then just a reminder to make sure you have established your Zoom schedules with your Zoom teams, et cetera, et cetera. We'll pull up this document to show you. This is just a glance at, we're going to make every effort to follow this. Dr. Revis, in just a few minutes, her weekly topic is going to be on decision making, and this is coming from chapter 3 of the Ubben textbook. And then after that, we're both going to make comments on task 1 of the APSL, and at that point, I will bring out some things about, go back into Blackboard and show you some things that you need to be doing prior to a final submission. I'm going to review task 2 of the APSL, and then we have no choice but to go ahead and introduce task 3 of the APSL, and some of you will be ready for that by the end of the week based on some of the work that has been submitted. There'll be some peer review reminders and then some Zoom team reminders, but that's basically what we're going to try to do. I'm going to ask you to do this because I've reflected this week, and Dr. Revis, you piggyback on what I'm saying in just a second, but I've reflected on what, the last 2 weeks, and we do want to entertain any questions that you have, but sometimes when you get your mind on something, you get your mind off of what we are trying to tell you, and you lose focus of that. So we want to answer your question. So I'm asking you, if possible, please hold any questions towards the end of the class, and I promise you, we'll answer anything that you need, that you have a question about. We will answer that before we close out tonight. But chances are that if you pay close attention, chances are 99% of those questions are going to be answered tonight. It's very, 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 very important that you focus on everything that we have to say. This is a crucial time with making sure that you catch up with whatever it is that you're doing this week, and that you don't get behind. So that's what we're going to stress tonight as much as possible, making sure that you are able to keep up and that you understand where you are. Dr. Revis, do you have any comments about that?
Well, no, just to reiterate what you said, please just don't get behind. You've got several things to do this week. And we'll go through those thoroughly with you, and just don't get behind.
Right. And you know, everything's not bad, but our job is our job is to, you know, we have to be real with you because it's so fast paced. We've got to tell you where you are and what you've got to do to get to the next step. So, you know, when we say things, please, it may come across this way. We're not fussing. You know, we're just keeping it real so that you can keep up. With that in mind, I'm going to stop sharing, Dr. Revis, and Dr. Revis is going to move forward with our weekly presentation.
Okay, I'm trying to find that icon he was talking about in the left-hand side. Can you see my screen?
We can.
All right.
A+, Dr. Revis.
Let's see if I can get it to work now. Oh, goodness. Teaching an old dog new tricks. This was a reading that you had in week 2, and we've been running kind of a week behind on our topics to you, but we did not want to leave this course without a reminder about decision making, because this is so important. It's such an important aspect of what you're going to do as a school leader. Even in a classroom, you make hundreds of decisions every day. You make a lot of personal decisions. What am I going to wear? What am I going to take for lunch? To-do lists, those kinds of things. And in the classroom, when you're working with students, you make decisions on the fly, whether you're going to slow down, speed up based on questions and student responses. And the same thing happens when you are a school leader. So decision making, and you've probably had some of this in other coursework, but we wanted to review it again and try to get to the perspective of decision making for executive leaders. So this is chapter 3 out of the principal textbook that is kind of the cornerstone for all the texts that we do in this course, and we wanted to go over some highlights from that chapter. If you've not read the case study on page 43, I love it. This guy here that I have on the screen is a new superintendent, and he's been on the job not very long at all, when one of the bus drivers from the school district comes into his office and says, "Hey, Chief, I've got a problem." Or he says, "We've got a problem." I always love that "we" thing. "We've got a problem." And he said, "Well, what is it?" And he proceeds to tell to the superintendent now that he cannot get his children to class and school on time because in the morning his bus route gets stopped by a freight train. And the teachers and principals are fussing at him because he's not getting those students to school on time. And makes a recommendation that if he would just simply reverse his morning route, then he wouldn't hit that freight train coming through in the morning, and everybody would be wonderful and happy. So the superintendent says, "Well, that sounds great. Let's move on with it. Just notify your students and their parents." Well, that was fine. The superintendent felt very proud of himself because he had solved the problem. Now, guys, educators are problem solvers. That's who we are by nature. We want to solve problems, but we can't do that in isolation. So by the next day, the afternoon of the next day, this bus route change blew up in the superintendent's face. So here are the facts. First of all, the problem was not the superintendent's to make, because as small as that school district was, it did have a transportation supervisor who was in charge of designing and developing all bus routes, and they all had to be approved by him. Secondly, after thorough investigation, there was no morning train. And thirdly, the children had to ride the bus longer because he only reversed his morning route, so it meant that the children he picked up first in the morning, he dropped off last in the afternoon. So parents were up in arms about that. Lastly, and maybe even most importantly, the children had to cross the road. You see, that bus route was designed with the children's safety in mind. The superintendent messed up here because the problem was not his to make in the first place. He should have listened to the bus driver and kindly, gently moved him to the transportation supervisor. And folks, I'm going to tell you, when you become a principal, and you may have assistant principals, if you have given your assistant principals some, delegated them some areas of responsibility, please allow them to do their job. It's so tempting for us to want to solve everything, but we've got to make sure, first and foremost, is it our problem to solve? So, looking at the elements of any decision, first of all, we have to consider the facts and information. The superintendent did not stop to gather any facts or information other than what the bus driver was telling him. Consider all individuals affected by the decision. And again, taking time to stop and think, well, wait a minute, my transportation supervisor knows all and designs all the bus routes, so he knows what's going on here. And what about the parents? How inconvenient is that going to be to the parents? The third thing, you got to consider all options. You know, the bus driver just came in and gave one option. There may be other options. And lastly, consider the feasibility and practicality of your decision. So those are the elements of any decision that we want to make sure that we are considering as we work through that process of decision making. But there's also another huge thing that we have to look at, and that would be leadership virtues. You probably recall, maybe, that we talked about one of the things that you had to do this semester was go into TaskStream and self-assess your dispositions. Well, what those are belief systems and what you hold true and believe as an educator and as a leader. So we have to have a couple of virtues, keep a couple of virtues in mind when we talk about decision making. First of all, we have a big responsibility as a school leader to do no harm, to keep students first, and that's probably our first and foremost thing we always have to think about, keeping students first. And we have to be proactive, meaning you can't, if there's a problem, you can't just let it keep on festering. It's not going to solve itself. Secondly, we need to be authentic, and that means we have to examine our own beliefs and values and be genuine in approaching issues and problems. We have to have what's called a sense of presence, trying to understand the other people's perspective. You know, how does this impact families with small children when we change the bus route? How does that affect families in poverty when we decide to have a fundraiser in which we expect all students to participate? We have to be able to walk in their shoes and seek to understand their perspective. We have to have what is called an ethics of care, and that means not only meeting our own needs, but are the needs of others being met? And that has to be first and foremost in our mind. Of course, our whole educational system is based upon the cornerstones of equity and fairness and individual rights, and we have to always think of those things when we are problem solving and making a decision. And lastly, a critique, and that's questioning the appropriateness of your decision. Is it really appropriate at this point in this time? So we're going to talk about two classic models that your text goes into as far as a decision-making process. Now, it's not saying that you need to use these two models or that these are the two best models. They're probably the most popular models that I have seen before. And by the way, Dr. Stedman, please jump in here and add things as well.
Okay.
The first model I want to talk about is the Mayer model. I've got to move my screen over. And this is a model in which there's a matrix. On the x-axis is a continuum of quality, decision quality. And of course, that means those decisions that are very important to the school in achieving the school's goals and keeping that safe environment. There are also those kinds of decisions which take a lot of technical expertise and knowledge. And then on the y-axis, you have a continuum for acceptance, and that means the degree of acceptance and commitment that is required of your stakeholders to implement a decision. So what you look at in this quadrant is you ask yourself, if we have a decision that takes a high quality decision, meaning takes a lot of experience and expertise and knowledge, and one in which is high on the acceptance, meaning we want, it's in order for it to be positive, we're going to have a lot of stakeholder commitment to that, then we're up here in this quadrant. And this is a challenge for most school leaders, because here what we need to do is make sure we get plenty of involvement by a group, and that we need to make sure that, a lot of times issues that fall in this quadrant are those issues which are kind of hot and may cause some intense feelings. So we need to make sure that we're getting a lot of buy-in, and that can only be done when we are having a lot of good input into that decision. And so decisions such as possibly curricular changes in your school would fall into this area, budget development, schools policies that may impact large numbers of students would also be in this quadrant. Then we go over to quadrant 2, and these are decisions that do not necessarily take a great deal of expertise or knowledge, but they're still decisions that would require a high degree of acceptance. And therefore, again, anytime you have to have a high degree of acceptance, that's when Mayer says you need to pull in groups of people to help facilitate and help brainstorm possible solutions. Now, if we're down here in this third quadrant, we have high quality, meaning it's a decision, takes a lot of knowledge and expertise, but low acceptance. And so some of these decisions would be, in the technical sense, maybe equipment selection. And not that people can't get staked out on what kind of equipment to use, but nowadays with budget cuts, most teachers are just happy to get any kind of equipment. Information management, those kinds of things. Again, not taking a lot of expertise or commitment. And as we move to the fourth quadrant, not taking a lot of expertise and equipment, these types of decisions tend to be more concrete. And I think this is the easiest quadrant that we operate in, just because those decisions tend to be black and white. Or maybe there's a policy or a rule or regulation that we look to and align our decision with that. And that's why it tends to be easier. The next model, called the Vroom-Jago decision process model, when you look at this graphic organizer, which is not in your text, but when you look at that, you kind of get dizzy. And very simply put, you can use this model to determine if you should make the decision alone or involve a group, and to what extent the group should be involved. So you can just kind of work your way down. These are the questions you ask yourself as you're moving through the process, and these are the answers, when given, tells you what type of decision is best to make. Now, an A1 decision, and your text does a good job explaining this. This is a very autocratic decision, and this is one the school executive leader just makes the decision. No input, just finds the information himself and makes the decision. An A2 becomes a little less autocratic, in that in an A2, the school executive does talk to individuals, maybe not even telling them why he's talking to them, to gather some information and then makes a decision. Now, I think if you're going to talk to somebody, I always think you need to tell them why you're talking to them, because I think that creates some mistrust when that happens. But anyway, these two styles are very autocratic, making that decision. A C1 decision is a decision whereby the executive would shares a problem with people, groups of people or individuals, and ask for their opinions, but doesn't necessarily take their opinions. But he does at least talk to persons or small groups of people. In C2, it becomes convening a larger group of people, but on an advisory status, which means you pull people together and you ask them to problem solve with you and give you possible solutions, but you make the decision still. And then it goes to the last piece on the continuum, and that is a G2, and that's where you really pull together a consensus building group. The principal can be a member of that group, but just a member. He or she can be the facilitator, but has no more say-so than anybody else in the group, where the group generates possible solutions and analyzes possible solutions and comes to a consensus on a solution, and the principal implements what they have come up with. May seem safer in the beginning, and you may think that people respect someone who's very decisive and makes decisions. Well, just let me tell you from out of experience, and I promise you, just as you're sitting in that seat tonight, when you become a school leader, you're going to make some wrong decisions. It's just the way it is. We're human. Try to make sure that you're gathering your information. Talk to people. Get them involved. And if you make a wrong decision, don't try to cover it up or make excuses. I think that people respect you as a leader if you have the confidence to say, I made a wrong decision. I'm sorry I took us down this track. Let's back up and repunt here and redo this. I think that's an admirable trait, but you have to be confident enough, and you can't do it every time, but it does make you slow down when you make a mistake. I think it does make you slow down, and it does make you want to be more collaborative in that decision-making process. Dr. Stedman, jump in here.
I want them to know a lot of with the decision making. That is where you are right now with the leading the PLCs that you have formed, and the work that you're going to be doing with task 2. A lot of that is you're leading it, but then there's a lot of collaboration as you come to a decision about what is the identified problem, at your school. So, the consensus will be, as you lead that group, it's going to not be just you, it's going to be a group decision. So a lot of decision making is going to be taking place in what you're doing with the development of the APSL. And also, Dr. Revis, the models that Dr. Revis has introduced you to, as you move into 603 next semester, and then as you go into 605 in the fall, a lot of these will be discussed, especially in 605. A lot of this is really discussed in 605. So you'll see some of these same things, but you'll see them in much more detail, and you'll actually put a lot of this to use or practice yourself then.
Well, the main thing that I want us to gain from this is a quote that Dr. Stedman shared with me about decision making, and it's, if small groups are included, they should be allowed to make decisions. And if you set up teams and just use them merely for advisory purposes, it loses the advantage the team has, and that's namely collective wisdom. And I think that's so true. But you have to, sometimes there's nothing wrong with bringing the group together and talking to them about, we've got to stay within these parameters. Of course, you can't break school board policy or policies and procedures that have been set up by your district office. We have to operate within some parameters. But again, that is giving some authority away, and you've just got to be confident in the people that you're working with, that they're going to make decisions based on what's best for your students. And lastly, I wanted to share, this is a document that is in your book, the problem solving steps. I want us to, this is nothing earth shattering, you've probably seen this before, but I want to talk about the very last step, evaluating results. All I would say is, guys, one thing that we tend not to do well in education is evaluate results. We put programs in place all the time, but we don't look at pre and post data. So when you make a decision, let's say you're brainstorming and problem solving, maybe your school has an issue with extreme numbers of student tardies to class. Well, you've got to have, first of all, some data to say that it's even an issue or it's a problem, but then use that pre-data and measure it against your post data when you implement a new process to see if it is even making a difference. So make sure you're evaluating results. And that's one of the things that you're doing in your task 1 is you are evaluating student performance data to see if your instructional methodologies are being effective with the students. So I'll leave you on that thought. And Dr. Stedman, any other thoughts on this topic?
No, thank you, Dr. Revis. That's given them something concrete to think about as they're moving forward with the work that they're doing with the APSL. Okay.
I'm going to stop share.
Yeah, okay, stop share, yeah. And then I'm going to share. Okay. Okay, that brings me back. Let me pull up this, okay. Okay, this is the, what we want to talk about now is we want to change directions completely. We need to talk about the work that you had to do this past week. The discussion board activity for our review for APSL Task 1. And you're going to see me constantly bringing up these same documents. I'm going to bring them up a lot because we have no choice but to do that. But again, just a reminder, and Dr. Revis, you jump in anytime with things that you remembered. Now, it goes into discussion board, and you need to remember this, for review. Remember, it's for instructor review and our comments. I got emails or messages this week after Sunday, and it said, Dr. Stedman, I can't find my comments. Anything that Dr. Revis and I comment on in Blackboard, you can find it. You go right back to the discussion board, you can click on your name, and you can find the comments that we've made. And we both commented. Before I went to bed Sunday night, I had looked at everybody's work. I stayed up until almost midnight, but I had looked at everybody's work, and I had commented on every single person's work. Dr. Revis, you did too, but then you transferred, you went the next day and transferred it from, back in there. But they by Monday, they should have had comments. Everybody had their comments on everything for task 1. So your job is, when we give you comments, that is your opportunity to go back. You have to fix it. If we tell you that there's something wrong with APA and it's focusing on capitalization, then your job is to go back into that document and revisit the entire document for capitalization. Now, we're not going to highlight every little problem with capitalization. We may tell you that you need to look at this because there's a consistent problem with this with this one thing. But your job is to read and understand that APA 7th edition and to understand, you know, the new rules concerning capitalization or in-text references, you know, or you know, anything that we would tell you that there's an issue with APA. Your job is to go back into APA and you have to find it and you have to fix it. I will tell you this, and some of the issues were with sentence structure. It could have been as you sometimes your mind gets ahead of your fingers, or your fingers gets ahead of your mind, and you may have omitted a word and the sentence didn't make sense because there was something not there, or there's some issues with punctuation that, you know, and that makes all the difference in the world when, and we may tell you to go back and you need to look at your punctuation. Now, I will tell you, we're all not perfect in everything. Grammar may not be your forte, but grammar's got to be right in the documents that you send in. And if you know that that's not your forte, you're not the best at that, then what you need to do, you need to find a colleague that's very good at grammar and somebody that doesn't mind looking at your work and another set of eyes looking at it, and you say to them, you know, would you please look at this before I submit it to Dr. Stebbins or Dr. Revis for review in Blackboard, and, you know, just give it your look and your take on it. There's nothing wrong with that because we know what our strengths and we know what our areas of not, I don't like to say weaknesses, but things that we're not as proficient in. So if you know that's you, then before you send it to us, then you have another set of eyes to look at it. I will tell you something else. If you wait until the very last minute to do something, you're going to make all kind of mess with it. And I'm just going to be honest with you, Dr. Revis and I, if it looks like a mess, we're going to send it back to you. And we're going to tell you when you take your time and you do it right, because I don't want my time wasted. I don't want Dr. Revis's time wasted. We want it right. We're going to treat you just like you would expect, what you would expect from your students in your classroom. And I think that's fair. Wouldn't you shake your head if you think that that's a fair for us to expect that from you? When it's all over with, you're striving to be an administrator. Most of you will start out being an assistant principal, but your ultimate goal one day is to be principal and head of a school. And the documents that you are submitting to us, I want you to pretend that we are the superintendents of your school. What would you submit something that was not quality work to your superintendent? No, you would not, because guess what? Your superintendent would call you. That may give you a second chance, but sometimes you don't get second chances. So, you know, we're giving you second chances and we'll give you third chances. So the work that you turned in this past Sunday night, when we sent it back to you, if you didn't get 100 on it, if you got a 90 on it, a 80 on it, if you got a 70 on it, whatever, you have an opportunity to go back and fix it. You go back into discussion board, you create a new thread, you send us a revised document, and you tell us, you know, APSL Task 1 with revisions. When you send it to Dr. Revis and me, then we should see that you have made every effort to make that document as perfect as possible based on our recommendations and on your peer reviews as well. And when you send it back to us, if you've done what you're supposed to do and it's right, you could actually, it could become 100. So that 70 becomes 100, or that 50 becomes 100, whatever it is. That 90 can become 100. You have a chance every time with your discussion board activities to fix the problem and put it in there, and we will change that grade if you do what we tell you to do. And that will be with every discussion board activity that you send in for our review. So the things that were wrong this week, you need to go ahead and you need to take care of those issues immediately so that you can get over this and you can move on with task 2. You don't ever want to have to struggle with 2 tasks at one time. So it's important that you go ahead and fix the problem as soon as you can after you get our feedback, so that you can go on, put that behind you, and move on to the next task. Does what I'm saying make sense, Dr. Revis?
Yes, it does. And just let me say a couple things. I made the mistake with my students that I put my comments that should have been private comments in discussion board. So if you want to see, and then I talked with Dr. Stedman, I realized I'd done it in the wrong place. Our comments would be found under my grades, correct, Dr. Stedman?
That's correct. Because
Okay.
you got a grade.
You got a grade, and so I apologize for doing that, because I'm going to be pretty specific as I can without going through the paper line by line. But if the content was not the issue at all, and I don't want APA to become such a big issue that you think that's the most important thing. It's not the most important thing, but it is important because you're completing graduate level scholarly writing, and you have to follow APA 7th edition. Guys, it's not hard. All you got to do is use that link to the library that is posted on your left-hand scroll down bar, and it takes you right to it, and you can look up everything that's there. If you think you're going to find another teacher or friend that's going to teach you APA 7th edition, I'm afraid you're not.
It's not going to happen. Dr. Revis and I are having to spend some time looking at the changes as well, because we have been working with the 6th edition for so long. So, we're having to look at these things as well. So spend some time looking at that. Dr. Revis, I want to tell them too, I can't stress enough, follow the template. Follow the template. I'm going to say it again. Follow the template. Remember what I told you. When on the first page, what is the only thing you have to do on that first page? Your name here. You don't do anything else. You write your name there, and guess what? You go on to page 2. You leave everything there. Now you see all this stuff right here. These are just telling you what to do. You need to take that stuff out. Once you've done it, you take that, and that, you take it out. You delete it. When you come down here to school profile, okay, school profile, this is where the heading is supposed to be. Just like you see it. You don't change it. But guess what you take out? You take out the yellow highlighting. We're just telling you that is where you've got to do some writing there. Okay, so there's the school profile, and not beside it, but underneath it, you're going to write your school profile there. Your school profile, make sure you go back and you look carefully at APA, because there were a lot of issues under the school profile where there should not have been a capital letter and capital letters with, because that has changed. So you just need to go back and you need to fix that based on that. I will tell you to be careful about too many just listing things. ... This is supposed to be narrative work. It's okay to have some listings, but don't make your whole document nothing but one list right after the other. Remember, we said if it's black, it stays there. You don't mess with that. If it's yellow, you write something, but then you're going to take the yellow highlighting out. If it's red, we're just telling you that these are things that you need to consider in your narrative work, and then you take that red goes away. So where you are right now, and remember, I'm very quickly because I got to move on. The PLC research, this was not your opinion. This was not, that research is, what does the research say? What does a good PLC look like based on DeFore and others? That's what that was supposed to be, and just check carefully for your in-text references there. I think the rest of it is self-explained. Remember, after your PLC meeting, remember that you must have a reference section. It comes after that. And then after that, remember there is an appendices. And remember very quickly, we told you that you need to have under the appendices your email requesting to do the PLC and an affirmative response. It must go there. You must have those artifacts, and there must be a copy of your meeting agenda there. At a minimum, those documents must be there. So those are the things that you need to fix with task 1. Dr. Revis, very quickly, anything before I go into task 2?
I think that's it. You just dig into APA and just learn it.
Okay.
Okay.
And you need to get those revisions back to us as soon as you can, the first part of this week, so you can go ahead and concentrate on task 2. You don't need to wait on it, but so you need to get that over with so you can move on to task 2 with no problem. Now remember, we said if it's in black, it stays there. So task 2 is a new document, and you keep the black there. Where you are now, there's 2 prompts. Remember, we said that in task number 1, or prompt number 1, remember we said that these are your data collection strategies, and you can refer to your APSO Helpful Hints document that's in Blackboard as well. But remember, with your data collecting strategies, remember that you're leading your team, and you just going to narratively come up under that, and you're going to say, these are the things that we're doing to collect data to try to find whatever our problem is, our most pressing need, because that's ultimately that's where you're coming to. Okay, but this is step 1 of it. What am I going to do? Where am I going to start? What strategies are in place? You're talking about it. You and the team are narratively deciding this, and you're just writing, this is what we're going to do. Then after that, the criteria and the process for identifying the most pressing need. Okay, these are the strategies. Now, what criteria, what processes are we going to, what are we going to put in place? What's going to be our plan to identify how are we going to get there? What's our plan? What's our strategies? And all you're doing is what you and your team decide. You're telling us. You're telling your story right there. And then after that, your collaborative data analysis. You've done all of this up here. You've got everything that you can think of, and you've laid it out on the table. Now, guess what you're going to do? As a team, you're going to break it down. You're going to analyze it. You're going to cut it apart. You're going to look at everything that you can. You're going to talk about it. And once you've done all that, based on the facts, not what you think, based on the facts, as a group, you're going to say, based on everything that I've done here, this is what we have identified as our most pressing need. Now, in meeting with our clinical, and doing my clinical coach visits this week, some of them have said, well, my principal said, this is what we want you to do. Now, remember, it can't be dealing with discipline. It cannot be dealing with attendance. It can't be dealing with self-esteem or, those kinds of things. It must be dealing with something that can be, there's a test attached to it, where literacy, math, those kinds of things, that a test is attached to it. Your principal may say, you may think, well, literacy is the issue. You can talk about it, and you can say, the team, based on everything we've done here, the most pressing need that we identified as a team is. However, the principal has asked us to focus on the following as the need for our PLC. You must do whatever it is that your principal wants you to do, as long as it's something that can be measured with a test. Dr. Revis, anything you want to say about that?
Yeah, we've got a question about what is the collaborative data analysis. One of the things I hope you realize is in the task 1, all you had to do was have your first meeting and basically set up norms. A couple of you went on in to start talking about an identified need without doing your data analysis.
And I told my students that, that this kid doesn't belong here. You've got to put it in task 2.
Put it in task 2. So your collaborative data analysis, it is the expectation that you would bring to that second meeting your data, okay? And then you guys as a collaborative group are going to sit down and really dive into that and how you're going to do the analysis, what criteria are you going to use for identifying the most pressing need. Those kinds of things. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, and that is it. And just remember, and there's two prompts. After you've done all this, prompt number 2, you write about it in prompt number 1. Everything in prompt number 1 is narrative work. Everything. Now you're looking at a lot of stuff in prompt 1. You're looking at it. Now you're going to decide based on all that stuff that you've looked at up there, what are you going to do in prompt number 2 to tell the same story with graphic information? What charts, graphs, the actual test scores from the report card. What is it that you're going to take from up here and put down here that we can see? We've read about it up here. Now I want to see what you're talking about. So down here, I should see things that's going to help me understand more about what you've done up there. And you're going to remember that you must identify them. You must identify them properly with APA, and you put you conclude it with, if there's a references, and you put your reference section there, and then your appendices. And then once you've done all of that, you've got it all together, you feel comfortable with it, then your job is that you've got to present this to your administration, to your principal at least. You've got to present it to your principal and say, this is what we have found, and there must be evidence that you have presented that to your principal. It could be a video, but it doesn't have to be, because some don't want to be videoed. There must be, you could be a picture of you presenting and an agenda of you presenting a PowerPoint where you've presented the findings to your leadership team, or your leadership team, and it could be to your school improvement team if they allow. And then you would put underneath that, your PowerPoint presentation, the actual slides, not a link, your actual slides to that. And then you have completed task 2 when you do that. Now, what we should see this coming Sunday night is we should see everything that you've done up and, as far, you may not have gotten to the data presentation because of time. You need to try to do it if you can. But if not, then the data presentation would have to be, you give us what you've got up to that point if you're not able to get the data presentation. And then you let us know that the data presentation's coming, and it must be done by the first part of the next week before you have to submit this for a final grade. But you will resubmit it with the data presentation for a full grade if you are not able to submit the data presentation to your administration on Sunday night when you have to submit it for our review. Based on their schedules, you may not be able to get to them, and we don't hold that against you. Now, when we grade you, we're not going to give you a complete grade because that hasn't been done. However, when you submit it back to us, then we can give you your complete grade once that data presentation has been attached. Dr. Revis, any more with that before I move on to task 3?
I Not that I know of. Thank
Okay,
you.
now this, remember, this is due for our review on Sunday night. The only thing I'm doing now is introducing you to task 3. You won't begin on this, but you need to be thinking ahead of time about what it is that you've got to do, and we will fully discuss this on next Tuesday night. Task 3, the candidate will research. Okay, you've identified that most pressing need in task 2. When you get to task 3, you know what the problem is. You've identified it. Now, based on that problem you've identified, the candidate's going to research best practices. And what you're going to do, you're going to do 2 things. You're going to create a literature review, and you're going to do an annotated bibliography. You're going to do 2 things that features descriptions of several best practices and specifically why they were considered. All of this research that you're doing on best practices and this annotated bibliography, everything is going to be possibly research and things that you could use to help with your identified problem. If your identified problem is if it's literacy, if it's school-wide literacy, then everything that your literature review is going to be on literacy, and you can focus on specific things about literacy as well. You know, there's so many different subcomponents of that overall topic, and every one of your annotations in your annotated bibliography will be about literacy. You're going to look for stuff that's going to help you better understand how you can help with that identified problem in task 2. Dr. Revis, anything that you want to say about that?
No, I think you're good.
Okay. So you're going to do 2 things. You'll be doing 2 things and again, we're giving you this now so you can begin thinking about it. So in prompt number 1, candidates, you're going to create an annotated bibliography that is featured in the narrative to evidence and illustrate resources for best practices in your identified need area, including a section that features online tools to support the teacher and student. And I'm going to go to your APSO helpful hints in just a second. And then there's a second part of that. Candidates will detail how the PLC created and used multiple graphic organizers and visuals, such as charts, graphs, tables, timelines, etc., and you're going to embed them in the narrative work of the PLC. Now, we're going to talk about this more, but what you're going to do when you do your online tools, and these are things such as, many of you have these programs in your school already, online programs. It could be, and I'm going to use Study Island, Edmentum, Plato, you know, any of those research evidence-based programs that you might use. When you do your research on any of them, when you go into the research, they have created already, they've got charts and graphs and all kinds of research-based information that's already available for you. So what you will do is you're going to pull from that research that you've done, you're going to pull some of those graphics that you can embed in prompt 2 and in your narrative work that's going to better help understand and explain what you've done up here in prompt 1 in your research and with your annotations. Dr. Revis, any comments on that?
Yes, and also look at your helpful hints, because it goes more specifically and talks about that annotated bibliography should have at least 5 regular resources.
And that's let me pull that up.
And a minimum of 3 online resources.
Let me pull that up. APSO helpful hints. Okay.
I think the helpful hints goes into more detail.
It does, but I wanted to point that out. Let's go quickly here because our time's running out. Okay, this is task 2 that we've talked about, and this tells you step by step again exactly what you're to do. That's prompt 2. I'm sorry.
I think go on down to task 3.
Yeah, I wanted to show them this because there's task 2, prompt 1. Again, what I've talked to you about that you do this week, this tells you exactly, almost word for word, what I've said to help you better understand what it is that you've got to do. And if you'll follow this, if you'll you need to make hard copies of these documents and have them side by side when you're doing your work. And when you look at your template and you look at that, if you will follow, and even the example that we've given, and I will tell you, the example is a good example, but it's not a perfect example. We did that by design. We weren't going to give you a perfect example. And there's probably some things in there that probably still need to be fixed, Dr. Reffis, but it's still a good example. So follow the helpful hints and read everything carefully. It tells you step by step what you need to do to get your work done. And even to, in the green, even to the presentation that you've got to do with your administration. And again, here we are. This is task 3 that we were just introducing. The research that you're going to do, in the research that you do is like your annotated bibliography. You're going to create an annotated bibliography that is featured in the narrative to evidence and illustrate resources for best practices in your identified need area. You must include a minimum of 5 regular resources and 3 online resources. And we've talked about, and this is not your opinion. This is, what does the research say? Based on best practices in my identified area, what does the research say? And the programs, there's many programs out there. I've just listed a few. Study Island, Edmonton, Plato, Accelerated Reader, Dr. Reffis, and there's probably, a little of me is old school. There's probably so many new ones out there I can't even name them. Any research-based, evidence-based program that, and again, you need to look at programs. Now, if it's a $500,000 program and your school is working on a shoestring budget, then you know what? Don't put that in there to present to your administration, because guess what? They can't buy it. But now, if you're a Title I school and you've got a lot of extra money or some low wealth monies that you're fortunate to have, that could look at some more sophisticated, expensive program, then by all means, just say, I've done research in this area, and I feel that if we had this program, programs don't change things, but programs can help with things. These programs could assist with our identified problem. But now we don't want that to be the one and only solution to you think now this is the Band-Aid that's going to take care of it all. There should be a lot of resources that you look at. And then it explains what your little research paper should look like. A minimum, you will complete a mini research section on the best practices for your identified problem. And with that, you must have a minimum of 3 references there. So you're doing 2 things. You're doing an annotation of 5 regular resources and 3 online resources. And then you're going to do a mini research paper and prompt 2, a mini research paper with a minimum of 3 references, still on best practices that's talking about your identified problem. And this is where the graphic organizers are going to be put in there multiple, and this is where you refer back to those online resources and those things that you have identified in your, it all ties together in your annotated bibliography. Next week, we're going to actually, Dr. Revis, if you would, I looked at the APA book, if you would be ready to show them and provide them with what an annotation should look like, and we're going to talk about that next week. We'll go into more detail about that next week. Again, remember, you're going to have a reference section and you're going to have an appendices, and you need to be talking to your group. Now, when you get here, this is more independent work. Your PLC does not work with you, but you still need to be sharing with them those things that you're doing. Most of this work, now some of them may assist you with this, but most of this work is going to be more independent than the group work you've done in task 1 and task 2. Wouldn't you say so, Dr. Revis?
Exactly.
It becomes more independent work. We're getting close to the end of our time. I just want to remind you, let me see if I can find this and come out of this. Revis, while I'm trying to find that, here it is. In Blackboard, and I'm getting hoarse. In Blackboard, remember, you need to fully understand, because this is where everything is going to go. Whatever you do for us, it's going to, you're going to find it right here to submit it. Now, this week, now remember, you go back to discussion board and you create a new thread to resubmit your work in task 1 for our review. After you do that, when we give you your blessings, and we're going to say, okay, submit for final evaluation. When you've cleaned it up and you're ready for that final grade, because now once it goes there, that's it. That's it. You're gonna get another final grade on it. If you've done everything that we've told you to do in the discussion board, the grade should be the same. If you made 100 there, you should be able to get 100 when you submit it for a final grade if you've done what we've told you to do. So what you do, you go to there's the APSL task for review or discussion board. But then this is the APSL assignment drop box. This is where you're going to drop it for your final grade. Now, you see right there, APSL task 1 final for evaluation. You click on that. You can see you can get up to 100 points. You can tell us whatever, if you want to tell us anything, you can, but you don't have to. All you've got to do is browse my computer. You need to save it in a Word document. Make sure that it is the final copy with all the revisions, everything that you want it to be. You submit it, you browse my computer, you attach it, you submit it, it goes to Dr. Revis and me in Blackboard for your final grade. And pretty much, APSL task 1 is history, and then we're completely into task 2 after that. So that's what you do. The same thing for those of you that have not, that make sure that you're taking time with your peer review, and that this is where you find your template. Once you complete it, then you save it as a Word document. Then it goes into your files. When you get ready to submit it, this is the completed peer review Dropbox. Remember, you've got to do 2 of them for task 1. This is where you attach them. Right here. This goes to us for grade. I've gotten questions this week, Dr. Revis. What about the feedback to our peers? You put it back in Blackboard as a thread, and you attach it and you send it back to them, and they can pick up your document in Blackboard for their review. So you put it back in Blackboard, a new thread, you attach the document. If Dwayne is doing Amy, then he completes Amy's, and when he's through with it, he saves it as a Word document. He puts it in back in discussion board as a new thread, sends it to Amy with a comment on it, and then Amy's got a document from one of her peers that she can look at. Okay. I just happened to see Dwayne and Amy, and that's why I said that.
Another question that's come up, do we keep the APSL task has 5 tasks.
Right.
You're turning these in one at a time. So what we need for you to do is you make one document out of the APSL task 1, and at the end put the references and appendices.
Right.
Okay, and then you're going to have one document for task 2.
Right. Thank you.
Go through that process. At the end, after all 5 are done, we put them back together. But for what we're doing right now, submitting and reviewing each of these individual tasks, they have to be separate tasks. Okay?
Right. And then what we'll do, Dr. Revis, when we get through with task 4, before they do task 5, we will tell them at that point how to go back and what to do and put it all together for the final document at that time. But go ahead, Dr. Revis. I'm sorry.
And another question says, are you submitting task 1 twice to the discussion board for instructor review? You don't have to resubmit it for our review. If you want us to reconsider the points you scored on that first review, then yes.
If they don't send it back, then the points stay the same. Common sense.
That's up to you.
Common sense would tell me that if you didn't get 100, you want to send it back to us so you can at least get 100 out of it if you possibly can. That's common sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
I would advise you to send it back.
The peer review goes in 2 places, guys. You want to be able for your peer review to go back to the person for whom you review. And the only way they can get it is through discussion board. Okay? But we need to get your peer reviews for a grade. The only way we can grade them is when you drop them in a Dropbox. Okay,
and there's 2 places. They go to discussion board for their peers. They go to the APSL completed peer review Dropbox for Dr. Revis and me.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Does that make sense? Okay. And please, when we say this, we're not trying to treat you like little children, but we think that it's so important at this point that we do what we're doing and how we're doing it so that you will understand it and you will be successful with this. Dr. Revis, any other questions from anybody at this point?
We have a new superintendent. He spent several dollars implementing new programs guaranteed to help students. Am I allowed to use a program that we just got and implemented this year?
Yes. Yes, that would be fine. But still, in your annotations, look for other resources as well. But if you've got something that, I have no problem with that because you don't really know the full results of that yet. So yes, that would be good. That would be fine.
I think we've answered all the questions in the chat box up till now, unless there are any questions that
I think they've paid attention. I've watched. They've paid a lot of attention. Guys, we want you to be successful. You're paying a lot of money for this program. And Dr. Revis and I, we want you to do well, and we're going to do everything on our end to try to help you get there. But now I'm asking you this. You have got to set aside quality time. As busy as your schedules are, we've talked about this already, you've got to set aside quality time to be able to give us quality work. Now,
and guys, this course is compacted, okay?
It is.
And accelerated.
They're already, I can see they're already realizing that their life has got to change a little bit. So they're trying to figure out how to do it. So, make it happen. You've got 3 weeks of your life already invested in this. Don't throw that away.
It's intense, and I just think you have to plan on working every night on this material, or you're not going to be prepared to meet with your PLC when you need to and have your narratives written in a scholarly, correct fashion. It's it's going to take some time. And if you've been out of graduate coursework for a while, it takes a little bit of time to get back up to speed and get your routine and knowing when you can grab a minute here, there, and yonder. I visited a teacher yesterday, and he's a PE teacher, teaches straight through all day and drives a bus morning and afternoon. And he's struggling with when he's going to get his clinical internship hours. And they're going to have to get very creative. I guess he's going to use his lunchtime. But, you know, you just have to make time for the coursework, and you can do it. It's worth it in the end because it's only 3 intense semesters.
Right.
It's intense.
But anyway, I really do think that after this week, based on what we've said tonight, I think we're going to see the quality that we expect from them coming in. And that doesn't mean, you know, I don't want you to think everything's bad. It's not. It's just not what we want it to be and what we're going to push you as hard as we can to get the best that we can possibly get. We wouldn't be who we're supposed to be if we didn't do that. Join us on Thursday night with Dr. Lamb at 7 o'clock. He's going to continue with helping us better understand TaskStream and setting up your competency folio. So if possible, and it may end on Thursday night for a few weeks, or we may decide that we've got to do it. We've got next Thursday built in if we need it, but we may not need it based on how things go this Thursday night. But anyway, we're going to sign out at this time. Thank you so much for your attention. Dr. Revis, thank you so much for everything that you have said and done. And we look forward to seeing you on Thursday night. I will be sending out this video later on tonight. It will always, this one will be under week 3 as well for future reference when you need to go back to it. Good night, everybody.
Good night.